My name's Tom Cassidy. I'm here with a panel of various industry professionals. I'm going to let them go around and introduce themselves, but I'm a member of the Din Real Estate Group with Omar. And why don't you go around, just introduce yourself, say what you do, and how you interact with this real estate industry.
All right, I'll start off. I'm Omar Din, the president of the Din Real Estate Group, brokered by EXP. We're primarily based out of Sewell, New Jersey. We cover all of basically all of New Jersey and the greater Philadelphia area in all facets of real estate transactions.
Hi, I'm Bill Bolton. I'm with Foundation Home Inspections. We're based out of Delaware, New Jersey. We cover all of South Jersey, basically from 195 all the way down, including Mercer County. So, Kevin.
Awesome. Hey, Kevin Diduch, the owner and principal attorney of KD Law in Haddonfield, New Jersey. We're a comprehensive real estate firm, handle everything in New Jersey real estate, from transactions, land use, zoning, and development, redevelopment, and my personal favorite, litigation.
Excellent.
Awesome. So the reason we're all together, and thank everybody for taking the time today. We don't want to bore anybody. There's a big thing in the real estate industry that's going around. It's the as-is sale. And, a lot of times people start these calls and they'll say, oh, I have a friend that asked me about this, but it's a legitimate thing right now that I had one of my wife's friends, they asked me my opinion on it. I was like, I gave them my opinion, but I was like, I don't know that there's a resource out there where all the fields will come together to talk about this. So I want to kind of get your opinions on things. So when speaking about an as-is sale, what does as-is mean to you in your respective field when it goes with real estate?
So from a realtor perspective, I think this is something that gets really murky, especially now, given the short supply of properties that started, once COVID happened and all the lockdowns, and we're still seeing light inventory, not quite as bad as it has been. But, I think one of the biggest things to educate people on is what as is even means, because there's a lot of different interpretations. And I think as a realtor, my first job is to find out from my client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, what does as is mean to you? I think it's too gray and too vague of a term that can apply to a multitude of facets. So from a fiduciary standpoint to my clients, that's the first thing that I want to know is like, what does that even mean to you as a client?
Go ahead.
For me as a home inspector, I guess the as-is sale, a lot of people, they kind of discount it when they purchase the property, say, well, it's just an as-is sale. So we want to do the inspection, but it really doesn't matter. And for me, it matters more because I always do a good job. I'm always thorough, and it doesn't change how I approach the job. I still give them a full, thorough inspection, because if they do want to walk away from their good faith money, it better be a big reason. So, I think it's still important that they do it. But, they're not going to be able to nickel and dime over handrails or stuff like that. So, for me, it doesn't change how I do my job. It makes me, I still think it's important for them.
So Bill, if you go to McDonald's and you buy a cheeseburger, are you saying that you can expect not to gain any calories after you wolf it down? Is that what you're saying?
No. I don't expect that. I wish that was true.
Right. So classic lawyer answer, it depends, right? It really depends. It depends on the perspective. It depends on who's making the argument. So in New Jersey, there's very little definitive case law on the issue, which makes it extremely problematic. Omar nailed it on the head. It's a gray area. Bill, same. Everybody sort of marches to the beat of a drum, and if one line in the contract says as is, and section 43, the famous, my favorite section of all time on a real estate contract, it says properties being sold as is, inspection for informational purposes only. If the remainder of the contract doesn't strike the inspection contingency clause, then what happens? That provision's still there. The other provision might supersede it, kind of, sort of. At that point, you're creating a tremendous amount of difficulty interpreting how the rules of the game are set. And if you've got a seller that has a property where they sort of don't want to give away what's going on, maybe they lived there for a while and there's some issues, then it works out totally, for them. And if you have a buyer that is maybe overzealous in what they were asking for, you read it the other way. So I hate to say it, but classic lawyer answer, it depends.
That is the classic lawyer answer. That is classic lawyer answer. So I'm gonna ask just a question. So this doesn't necessarily have to be a professional answer, but you have a friend. They ask you, they're like, "What's your opinion on an as-is sale? I'm thinking about buying it." We'll kind of go around, like what you're, related to your field, but what would your answer be in a couple sentences, just of a friend asking for quick advice from you on an as-is sale? And Kev, we'll start with you, and then we'll kind of roll back the other way. So Kev, Bill, then Omar.
I appreciate that. So if I had a friend come to me and they wanted to buy a property as is, I would tell them absolutely call a licensed certified home inspector, have the property inspected anyway. I would also probably recommend that they do their due diligence with an OPRA request, Open Public Records Act request, see if there's been any permits pulled on things that have been done at the property. Proceed with caution. They can be incredible deals, but you need to proceed with caution.
And I tell all, and I'm obviously in the home inspection business, so I tell everyone to get a home inspection. But I have two examples why. One, probably about in the height of the pandemic, a young gentleman called me in Bucks County. Hey, can you come out and do a home inspection? I bought it as is, and I'm seeing problems. I'm concerned about it. A friend of mine recommended you, so I go out, and he had a deck built off the back of his property with water coming in the back of the townhouse.
Not supposed to do that, right?
Not supposed to do that, not at all. So I'm like, listen, you need to go to HOA and talk to them about it because there's a grading issue. They told me basically that I bought the house and it's my issue now. And the guy's like, I'm looking to, sublease it. I'm looking to go to Europe to go to school. I'm like, I really can't help you beyond that. I said, it's an issue though, but you have a water intrusion problem. Another issue was I did a home inspection on a flip. It was a god awful flip, and the people walked away from it. They asked for $29,000 at the closing table, and the flipper refused it. And I thought the buyer was being generous. And I had another realtor that works with me came through, saw my radon leave behind letters, and called me and says, "They're selling this house as is. What can you tell me about it?" So legally, I can't tell you anything because I don't work for your client right now. I can't do the inspection because legally I'm not allowed to do that. He said, "Well, do you think I should buy it?" I said, "I'll tell you this: you should never buy any house without a home inspection, especially this one." So, there can be a lot of issues, and it scares me when people do as is purchases.
So from the realtor perspective, I want to make sure that my client is protected from catastrophic scenarios. We're not worried about if something needs to be repainted or even minor mechanical repairs. The big thing is that even if someone's going to buy a house as is, I want to make sure that they have some sort of exit clause that they don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops through if something detrimental is discovered. So with that being said, even if something is being purchased as is, I want to find out from the listing agent, if I'm representing the buyer, we have to negotiate what the specific terms of that as is component is. So with that being said, I want to make sure that my buyer still retains the right to cancel the contract in the event that something, again, catastrophic, any of the higher ticket items is found. Let's say there was a underground oil tank that the seller legitimately was not aware of, that they couldn't disclose because they just weren't aware that it was there. And God forbid there was some sort of environmental contamination from it, or some sort of structural defect that was going to cost in the tens of thousands of dollars to repair. I want to make sure that my client isn't stuck holding the responsibility of it because, they got a little overly excited about a property and just decided to relinquish all of their protections and rights. So even if we do agree to purchase a house, as is and not ask for repairs, I still want them to retain the right to investigate to see if they're comfortable purchasing the house as is, so that they fully understand the condition of what they are buying. To me, that's one of the most important components to keep in there. And I think I've seen a lot of people get burned where they don't stick that exit clause into a contract, where that, yes, they're not going to ask for repairs, but still want to be able to retain the right to negate the contract if something unsatisfactory is found.
Exactly. Now, so something you just said there, Omar. So when you're putting together an as-is offer for a friend, for client, whoever you're going through, there's a couple different ways you can structure this. You can set it up. And like Kevin was saying, that everything kind of revolves in the gray area, especially in New Jersey with as-is. So like, Omar, this is probably more of a question for you on the real estate side, but what are the different types of as-is sales that you come across? And then kind of from there, we'll segue into you, Kevin, of like, based on those different types, how do you get on legal paper those things to actually happen for you?
So the couple components that I look at is, one, the buyer's home inspection. Is I try to spell it out into like as many different categories as possible. So with the home inspection, is the buyer allowed to ask for repairs based on the home inspection? That's one critical component. And then, is there going to be some sort of cap or threshold on items above or below a certain price point that they, that we're going to allow to be negotiated? Second is going to be, if there's financing involved, lender required repairs. Now, with that, if the financing isn't going to go through, the deal is going to be dead anyway. So 99.9% of the time, the seller's usually okay entertaining lender required repairs, and they retain the right to not accept the deal over that. But from my buyer's perspective, I want to spell out what are the terms for lender required repairs. And then the third category I always want to spell out, and all three of these are separate from one another that I try to include on the contracts, is CO or township repairs, permits, all the things that fall under township appeasement. So sometimes we might navigate as is on any combination of those three things, but to just throw out a whole blanket, as is, it's just so gray. An example of one of the contracts I just put together, and we just wrote this contract a couple days ago. For the home inspection, the buyer was assuming all responsibilities for anything under $5,000 in value. Anything over, the buyer and seller agree that negotiations can take place either for credits or for actual repairs. Lender repairs were fully going to be sellers, fully up for negotiation, and the seller is going to provide a passing CO. So 100% of the responsibility there is on the seller. So this way, we want to know what happens before these situations actually happen. So this way you don't have a room full of people all shaking their heads and shrugging their shoulders, trying to play pass the buck. I think the more clearly we spell it in the beginning, the smoother these transactions are, because everyone knows where they stand.
Absolutely. So you're more of a proponent when you're setting these up. Plan ahead, plan for the worst, and cross every T, dot every I as you're going through it, which kind of leads me to my next question is, Kevin, how do we legally do that? So if it's on a contract, on the standard boilerplate real estate contract we put together, like you had mentioned, there's a couple different clauses that are in there that are kind of gray. So let's say we'll go from two different angles. Let's say you're going from the angle of we're going to put an offer on this, and then you're going to have the buyer repairs, the lender repairs, and the CO type repairs. How do you properly structure that to make sure that you're benefiting the client, you're looking out for their best interest? And then on the seller side, if you're selling it as is, how do you make sure that there's not loopholes that are in there for it?
So much about life is expectation. And the reality is, if you're submitting something as an offer and the terms wind up somewhat different on the actual contract, you might not be meeting that expectation. So my recommendation in all of those circumstances is exactly what Omar said. Get it in writing as much as you can and establish the thresholds that you need, your thresholds for payment on both sides. You want to make a deal work, but you also don't want to make the deal work, get a check, and then have to pay some stinking lawyer to defend you in a lawsuit after the fact, right? Like nobody wants to do that. I mean, my kids want to go to college, but the reality is, at the end of the day, I want to have them go to college on the dimes that I collect from clients who are in honest transactions and doing things in a way that they can be avoided when there comes an issue. Aside from, possibly hiring Clark Kent as your home inspector, there are certain issues in a home you're not going to be able to disclose, not going to be able to discover. And those circumstances can be built into a contract, again, using those thresholds. Tell the client, you know what they want as a seller, but you also know what they don't want. They don't want to be surprised when it comes to an issue being discovered in their home and then having to negotiate from there, because there's no wiggle room. Nobody has a rule to follow. So set the rules.
I like it. Set it up ahead of time. So with that being said, there's a couple ways. So if you do go ahead and you do, you buy the house as is, Bill, this is going to be more of a question for you. When you skip the inspection, what are the biggest liabilities that you can get exposed to? That you may or may not even realize as you're going through it. Now, obviously, the older the house, the more issues and variables that can come up in there. But from your experience, what do you think the biggest liabilities that you've seen people get exposed to?
Well, I think, some of the structural issues, and even as a home inspector, some of the structural issues are a little more subtle, so to speak. A lot of people can look at a furnace and say, wow, that's really old, or an air conditioner. But when you have a settlement issue, it can be very subtle. You and I know we worked on a particular project together, and there was a vertical crack on both sides of the basement, and it was a sloping yard in the rear towards a creek. And most of the times, vertical cracks are very, very innocuous in relationship to the house. This wasn't. It just, there was a lot of other issues related to it. There was a sloping floor and a porch above, so we ended up getting a structural engineer out, and it was structural engineer recommended repairs. And thankfully your client was protected, but in an as-is sale, someone would look at that, and it was a nice house, and eventually that would get worse, and it would be a lot more money than what we initially had the contractor contracted for. So structural issues, life safety issues, like carbon monoxide. We're in a lot of issues today where I call them the Home Depot generation. People do their own repairs. I went to a house where they had a furnace, a dryer vent hooked up to a furnace vent, which could result in carbon monoxide in the house. And these life safety issues, structural issue is damage to your house, but life safety issue can destroy your family, literally. So just a lot of these issues that need to be addressed. And to your point, Omar's point, and Kevin's point, they want to know, at least you want them to have information on their house that they can, even if they still go through with it, they can repair and protect themselves and protect their. So for the amount of money that home inspection costs, I think it really it protects people.
Actually, if I remember right, Bill, I think that house was as is when we were working on it. So it wound up they did it just to protect themselves as they were going through it. But I guess my next question is going to be kind of to the panel itself. And everybody, we'll start with Omar and kind of work our way around. So we're going to get practical and let's say you're putting together an offer for a buyer, Omar. Mm-hmm. You're going to go through the different steps that you were saying. So the buyer repairs, CO repairs, lender repairs. How would you structure this offer, and how would you start that communication? Because sometimes I think clients get upset that they're like, I don't want to just put myself at risk here. I want to make sure that everything's covered. So what are the steps that you usually take to make sure that they are covered? And then how would you structure that offer going from there?
Sure. So first and foremost, I always, again, the client comes first. Making sure that they're protected from catastrophes is critical. In regards to the home inspection, if let's say we're in a multiple offer situation where, you know, the seller understands that, you know, they've got a lot of, you know, they've got the upper hand there due to that multiple offers. I just want to make sure that my client is not going to drop their pants out of excitement for just trying to win the bid, because sometimes winning can be losing if you don't proceed properly. So, you know, no matter what, I mean, unless this person has an extensive construction background and I've educated them on all the risks and perils of going in and not inspecting, I absolutely still will make sure that they get their home inspection. Now, I like to use that threshold of $5,000 that I've mentioned before, because the typical items that are going to exceed $5,000 are usually going to be a roof, structural repairs, a full HVAC replacement are really the primary items that usually go over that. And then obviously, if there's like an underground storage tank with contamination, you know, those would be the items that would, you know, that would exceed that. And anything below that, you know, let's say it's a water heater or a window, or, you know, the normal like maintenance wear and tear items on a house, typically those items fall under that. And, you know, does everybody have to use that 5,000 rule? No, but it seems to be one that has been well received by both buyers and sellers, regardless of which party I'm representing. It's just, it seems to be universally accepted in most cases. As far as like a CO, now, if it's like a vacant house, there's a lot of times, you know, it might be like a bank listing where they're just not going to get the CO. So I explained to the buyer, okay, anything that the township might mandate that you do, like that is your responsibility. And if they understand that and choose to accept it, then yes, like I want to make sure that I've done my part to let them know like as many risks and exposures as possible that come with it. And if they are going to be responsible for it, again, we want to make sure that we set a ceiling on it that, okay, if the township is requiring more than $500 or whatever amount that both sides agree to, that here's the cap, and then anything above that is up for negotiation, or the buyer retains the right to exit out of the contract if it exceeds. And same thing with, you know, lender repairs. Yeah, same exact philosophies apply. You know, if it's going to be a true as is sale, then okay, the buyer will assume responsibility up to X amount of dollars, and anything above that is a negotiation. And if the seller disagrees, then the buyer can exit under any of those. So you always want to make sure that there's some sort of stop that the buyer is like, okay, I'm assuming risk up until a certain point, and above that, it's only going to proceed if the seller and the buyer mutually agree upon it.
It's singular or cumulative, Omar? Does the repair have, does any one repair have to be $5,000 or more? Or
Well,
the cumulative value of all repairs?
It would vary, again, case by case,
Sure.
but we would want to make sure that, you know, we spell out those, you know, each of those categories. You're right. We do always spell it out, cumulative or individual. Typically though, I do usually spell each one of those sections individually.
That's a great question, Kevin, because I've often wondered that when people tell me it's an as is it cumulative or singular? Yeah.
Yeah. What's the cost of paint a railing? Oh, and then by the way, fix the step, and then oh, by the way, you know, fix the drawer in the kitchen. Well, if all that adds up, you know, none of those singular repairs in and of themselves are $5,000 or more, but you know, altogether, it's a different story.
Right.
And I'd like to add one item to your list, Omar. That's water intrusion, especially in crawl spaces.
Right.
South Jersey has a tremendous amount of crawl spaces, and water intrusion and water management of a crawl space, and even a basement, but more so for a crawl space, because everyone will walk down to the basement. No one's going to crawl in the crawl space when they're looking at a house at a listing. So I think that's very critical.
And Bill, can you always, like, one thing I was like, oh, I don't smell any water down here. Does that ever correlate, or is that something you see, like it gets smell perfectly dry and it still has water intrusion?
You can smell perfectly dry and you still have water intrusion. And you know, I mean, it's just, you know, I've been to my house in Morristown, the lower side of Morristown, that has, you know, they have to work to control that water down there. But there is definitely water intrusion in all areas of South Jersey, especially in crawl spaces it depends whether it's a dirt crawl space or a concrete crawl space. And dirt crawl space is obviously more sensitive to water intrusion. So, and that can be very expensive, especially in a crawl space, to control that water and to dry it out as well, especially if you get into mold. So, I mean, I've been, and go ahead, Omar.
Oh, I had a question that I want to pose to you, Bill, is what are some of the most detrimental things that you found in a home, in a home inspection? Let's go for like top 3 high dollar items that you found that maybe weren't so obvious at first glance.
Well, I think, stucco inspections, a lot of people, if they buy a house that's stucco, a lot of realtors that maybe aren't as savvy, they might not recommend a stucco inspection. But as soon as I see a house built in anywhere from 1990 to 2010, I always recommend a stucco inspection. And even beyond that, if I see some that fall outside of that with questionable construction characteristics, I still recommend a stucco inspection, because those repairs can be tens, bigger houses, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that's the most important. Structural issues are the other ones, because it can be involved, it can be expensive. You have to get a lot of times you have to get a structural engineer involved. It's building permit, a qualified contractor. It's not always the easiest process. And finally is water intrusion. I think water intrusion is very difficult, because a lot of times with water intrusion, you're dealing with it's a process of elimination sometimes, where, okay, we're going to do this, but we still have water intrusion. Okay, we'll have to add this on as well. So even if the buyer has the seller do certain things, at least they'll be a little bit more closer, because water intrusion will often be the most difficult problem. And the stucco issues and the water intrusion and crawl space, they're both water intrusion issues. So I would say water intrusion issues.
No love for termites, Bill?
Huh?
Where's the love for the wood-boring insect?
Well, there is termite issues too. I mean, termite issues are the big ones too. But often I find those. It's funny. I had a crawl space that had nothing, but it was completely damp, so we need moisture intrusion. But it was also, the beams were covered with termite damage as well. So
they were wet.
Omar only gave me 3 options. If I went for if I can combine stucco and water intrusion now, Kevin, I will, and go for the termite.
And how about radon, Bill?
I think radon's an easy one. I mean, just because it's it's an easy test, it's an easy repair, and you're protecting your family. It's it's a second leading cause of lung cancer among among smokers. First leading cause among smokers. Why non-smokers? Why wouldn't you want to check that box and just say, okay, I'm protecting my family, and I've looked into this.
I'm pretty militant about recommending people get radon inspections on houses, because you don't know until you test.
I agree, and I've had radon on slab on grades too. Omar, it might have even been one of your buyers as well, but it's rare, but it still happens. And
right.
I recommend all of them. I said, listen, most people,
I do too.
Most people and most realtors will recommend that you don't need it on a slab on grade, but I still recommend it to them, and definitely on a crawl space.
Right.
And I'll share a little something. Of course, I'm never going to be invited back after I say this, so just forgive me, okay? So if I have a client come to me and they're concerned about something that a home inspector should or shouldn't have caught on an inspection, I always emphasize to them that a home inspector is considered a jack of all trades, masters of some. In other words, the cumulative effect of the report is to provide a comfort blanket, to provide some idea here. All right, we want to look into this further. I'm not an expert in this. Look into it further. Hire the mold remediation professional. Hire the termite guys to come in. Get the radon test done, like Omar suggested. Because at the end of the day, the cost of those 3 tests and those professionals is just dwarfed by the litigation costs that come when those issues are even if they're not known about, not disclosed. So, that's
great. That's great. Actually, that's funny. I don't know if I was saying it to you, Bill, or if it was somebody else, but I was saying that the general home inspector is like the primary care doctor. You go to them and they're going to be like, hey, go check out the heart, and also, your kidneys are failing, so check out here. So make sure you get the other inspectors to go with it. So Kev, the next question is actually going to be for you. So this is going to be one. Let's say I'm in contract. Omar got me a contract. We're just a standard boilerplate. We just wrote as is on the contract. We did the in-home inspection. Bill found some stuff. I'm not happy with this contract anymore. I want out. And I say, Kevin, are there any loopholes here? I kind of know what you're going to say. Everything's a gray area. But with everything being on the boilerplate contract and a lot of agents not really knowing how to write this up, what recourse do I have at that point?
And here's the trick. You don't have to write anything. You just have to be able to read. So the reality is, in the standard residential contract, the inspection contingency clause allows for an escape and a request of repairs. Even if the section 43 and the remainder says as is, where is, without reservations, inspection for informational purposes only. If they've done the one, if they haven't done the other, it's not as relevant. In some cases, it's ineffective. So if you keep that mortgage contingency clause, I'm sorry, the inspection contingency clause into the agreement, it still allows for the person to make those requests, and it does. That provision has not been stricken from the agreement. The benefit for you as the buyer is that it is a gray area still, but it costs a lot of money and heartache and a judge to tell you who's right or wrong. So in most instances, from a practical standpoint, I would recommend that a client, at least broach the subject with the other side before they engage an attorney, because P.S., you don't always need a lawyer, and talk to them about, well, listen, these are the things that happen. We're not satisfied. And that gray area can solve a lot of problems.
All right, Tom, I want to give a 1-minute warning here on time.
All right, guys. So we'll go around real quick. Last second. I mean, 2 sentences. Thank you all for your time as well. But 2 sentences. Are you seeing things right now like are as is the standard, or is as is just the like a passing ship in the night? Like what kind of contracts are you seeing most right now?
I'm thinking it's going to be around for a while, for sure.
As is the standard. It may not be the expectation, but it's going to be around for a while. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I hear more about as is. I mean, I do my inspection. I try to leave a part out of it and do my inspection. But yeah, it's definitely, I've seen a lot more